Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This episode is sponsored by Janji. Janji is a local to Boston running apparel company dedicated to exploring, connecting, and giving back through running. Inspired by travel, informed by function, and built for adventure, Janji makes running essentials to equip you wherever you run or roam. The company was founded on the core belief that water is a human right and donates 2% of their sales to supporting clean water organizations around the world. I've known the two co-founders of Janji for over 5 years, and it's been a privilege to see them grow and increase the level at which they've been able to give back to the running community and to the world in general. Welcome back. Today I have Matt Bach joining me on the podcast. Matt, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Thanks. I'm glad to be on, Jonathan. Thanks.
For sure. First question, it's always a tough one. Who is Matt?
Who is Matt? Wow. I don't know if I want to get really deep here or just be very, what do you call it? Like pragmatic. Is that the right word? Very literal?
Yes.
Matt Bach, man. Matt Bach is a go-getter, is a triathlete, husband, father of 2 kids, and a lover of life.
There we go. So we were connected. You work over at UCAN. We spoke a number of years ago. But your background before working in triathlon or the endurance space was as a pro triathlete. Is that correct?
No, actually, I was working on Wall Street, but I did make a pretty heavy stint in the triathlon world with my triathlon career, which was a hobby on the side of my Wall Street career. And I got pretty good. I was at the level where I could have, like, quote unquote, turned pro. But I never ended up making the leap to being a pro and racing as a pro because of various reasons. But I mean, part of it is because making a living as a pro is really, really difficult. And I really only wanted to do it and race as a pro if I was able to do it in a full-time capacity. And there's not many people in the world who are able to do that.
So working on Wall Street and training as a triathlete, those are both pretty low time investments, right?
Yeah.
So how did you manage that?
Yeah. Well, definitely not a lot of time for other things. You basically just give up all friends except for training partners.
Right.
I mean, at the time I was, I was working in New York City. And in 2014, I had moved out to Summit, New Jersey, which is a suburb of New York City. And so my commute was about an hour and 15 minutes each way. And my training, I learned, needed to be a high quality, low quantity type of approach. So I couldn't spend 20, 30 hours a week training like many of my sort of, the people at my level, the other people at my level, like some of the, lower tier pros or the high level age groupers who maybe don't have quite as many life responsibilities. At the time, I didn't have any kids, at least. That certainly helped. But it didn't leave all that much time for me to spend with my wife. And there was a lot of training. I mean, between maybe 10 and 15 hours a week, usually between 12 and 16-ish hours a week, I guess, actually, during the season. So my commute and working on Wall Street, fortunately, some of the jobs that I had didn't require me, like many of the investment bankers and things who notoriously are out there working for 16+ hour days. I didn't have that. I mean, I was working somewhere between 8 and 12 hours a day, depending on how busy we were at the time. So the way I made it work, I mean, I'd get up, a little before 5 o'clock sometimes, most of the time. And I'd be either on the train on my way into the city where I'd train at my coach's CompuTrainer studio in New York City before I showered up and went to work. So I'd have maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours of a training session there, often on the bike, sometimes running, and then a strength session. And then I would head off to work. And then sometimes I'd be training after work too. So when I'd get home at, 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, I'd be out there doing, a hill workout or something.
That's quite a day. And how many years did you stick with a routine like that?
Probably about, I guess 2012 is when I really started training heavily, maybe even 2011. And that went through early 2016. So it was about 5 years where I was training pretty darn heavily.
And so you got into triathlon in 2010. I read on your website You got into triathlon with your wife to honor your brother who died of cancer a couple of years prior. What was it about triathlon that first was a way to honor him, and second, how did you choose triathlon versus tennis or marathons or whatnot?
Yeah, I guess like many things, it kind of just fell into place that way by like how the stars kind of just aligned. So my brother was a runner in high school, and before he was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, bone cancer, and then he battled cancer for 3.5 years and passed away in 2008. And he was only about a year and a half or so younger than me. He was age 20 when he passed away. So obviously we grew up together. We were really close. And it's sort of, I guess, subconsciously or in the back of my mind, been trying to think of some way that we could, make sure that we remember him and honor him going forward. And he didn't just become some forgotten brother that I never had. And so that was one piece of it. And then the other piece was a friend of my wife's had done a sprint triathlon. And she's not, I mean, I wouldn't really consider her to be like some exceptional athlete. I mean, she was a recreational athlete. She, had done a little bit of running or whatever here or there, but not like your superhuman person who jumps in and does a triathlon. So I was like, okay, well, she can do it, and maybe we could do it. And so I proposed on Thanksgiving. It was actually, I remember it pretty vividly. It was on Thanksgiving Day. We were driving to my in-laws, or not to my in-laws, to my parents' house, Lauren's in-laws. We're driving up there, and I just looked over to Lauren and I said, do you want to do a triathlon next year? And she actually agreed. And I didn't expect that because my wife is a dancer in the past. She's done a little bit of competitive swimming in middle school, but never really has been like a runner or a cyclist or anything. So I was kind of shocked that she said yes, but she did. And then we decided to combine the fact that my brother, we want to honor my brother with the fact that we're going to do this triathlon. And we thought it would be a great way to sort of remember him. So we raised money from family and friends to give to St. Jude's, because my brother, in the last year or two, people would give him money to just say, hey, go buy yourself something nice and like enjoy yourself. And a lot of the time he would take that money and give it back to St. Jude's in the hope that no child would have to go through what he went through. And that really kind of struck us all to the core. Like, wow, what a selfless act to just give that money away, for that purpose. And so we decided to raise money in his name and give it to St. Jude's.
That's awesome. So sprint triathlon, a little different than what you have also done, which would be some Ironmans. Let's talk about the progression from sprint to maybe Olympic to half to full. Yeah,
I went from the sprint distance 2010. I realized, hey, I'm good at running, I'm bad at biking, and I'm really bad at swimming.
So just skew it further.
Yeah, right. Well, to me, it was like really motivating though, because I was like, okay, if I get even like a little better on trim all that low hanging fruit in swimming and biking, like how good could I be? Because I'm already really good at the running. So it's like, I know how to train. I know how to be fit and fast in one sport. So if I apply some of that same methodology to the other sports, then, hey, maybe I could actually be pretty good at this thing. So I kind of caught the bug, and I have a competitive nature that's just deep grained within me. And I decided to do 2 more sprint triathlons that year. And then I noticed that the following year that I went and did an Olympic distance try, the New York City Triathlon. And I did the 3 half Ironman events, actually, Rhode Island, Timberman, and Rev 3 Quasi in Connecticut. And after I had done even just my first one of those, I realized, again, this was like a multiple time realization during my life, that if I go longer, I get better relative to the competition. So I started just going longer and longer. And I said, hey, if I'm better at the half Ironman distance than I am at a sprint, maybe I'll be even better at a full Ironman distance. So that's when I moved up to the Ironman distance in 2012.
That's awesome. What is that experience like, gearing up for an event where the marathon is the third piece of that puzzle? It's always something that's been fascinating to me. Like, I've run 6 or 7 marathons, and I can't imagine doing a 5-hour warm up or an 8-hour warm up.
Yeah. It feels like one big long training day during an Ironman. You can't go out too hard, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, the first Ironman that I did, I was just trying to finish. I didn't know if I could finish the darn thing. It's a long day out there. And it's just, running a marathon is no joke. And running a marathon off the bike and after a swim, I mean, you're already out there for at least 5-6 hours, if not more, like 7, 8, 9, 10 hours at least for some people before you even get to the run. And the other thing is you just got to set expectations properly. Like, that if you got off that bike after all that, you're not going to run what you can run in an open marathon, not even close.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So you've done a handful of those, right?
Yeah, I've done 6 total Ironmans at this point.
So this podcast is aimed at exploring the why around what keeps runners and athletes running long, strong, and motivated. And I'll ad lib in swimming and biking long, strong, and motivated here for you. What are you thinking? A question I like to ask is about, for people that run 100-mile races or whatnot, what are you thinking about first on the start line and at mile 80? So for you, I want to know what is the thought process at, mile 10 on a 112-mile bike, or, the half marathon of a marathon, when you might have another 2 hours of running ahead of you, or 3 hours of running ahead of you?
I guess for most of it, on the start line, it's just stay calm. This is an endurance sport. It's a long, long day out there, anywhere between 8 and 17 hours. It is a long, long day. So stay calm. Don't get overexcited. Smooth and strong. Like, being smooth means you're going to be fast. So just keep that heart rate down, keep the perceived effort in check, because it's going to be a long, long day. And then during the long, long day, say when you're on the bike and you're like at mile 80, it's kind of more the same of like steady, steady, steady. I've got my power output that I'm looking for on the bike. I want to keep hitting that steady pace and make sure that I'm pacing myself properly based off of what I've seen in my training. And like what I know I'm capable of doing. And then just before it, you mentioned mile 110, like 2 miles beforehand. That's when the brain starts to shift to, okay, let's see if I can make this transition fast. Because when you get off the bike, you transition from bike to run by racking your bike, taking off your helmet, putting on your different pair of shoes, your running shoes, and putting on maybe a visor and your race belt with your race number and all these different things that have to happen in transition. And that's all included in your time. So it's thinking through, like rehearsing it one more time or 10 more times in your head, like kind of thinking, okay, exactly how this is going to go down, and then smoothly executing that through transition so that you're not just losing 30 seconds or a minute or several minutes for no reason. And then during the run, when you're halfway through the run, it's making sure you're staying on top of your hydration and your nutrition as much as possible. That applies during the bike too, because at that point in the race, if you haven't kept on top of your hydration and your nutrition, then you're in for a whole boatload of trouble. That's usually where the wheels come off for people, and people are doing the Ironman death march.
So speaking of nutrition, you work at a nutrition brand. Let's talk more about that. How did you get involved with UCAN?
Yeah. So it was back in 2012 when I did my first Ironman. And then in 2013, I did 3 more Ironmans. And at that distance, when you're out there for that long, you're consuming a lot of calories and a lot of carbohydrates. And I was just following the lead of my friends and training partners when they said, you should take, they gave me a rule of thumb thing. They're like, okay, take your body weight in pounds and double it. And that's how many calories you should take per hour. So it's like, okay, 150-ish pounds times 2, that's 300 calories an hour. That's what I'm going to do. And I used, you name it, I tried it. I tried every product out there, and none of it was working for me. So during those Ironman events, I would be taking in, the first gel went down easily. The second was fine. But by the time I got to my, 5th bottle of sugary sports drink or my 7th gel, then it wasn't going down so easily. And I'm sure a lot of the marathoners and ultra marathoners that are listening can relate to this, because when you're out there for a while and you're taking the same nutrition, sugary stuff down, you just don't want sugar anymore. You look at that gel or whatever and you're nauseated by it. And I was definitely in that boat. I had all sorts of GI distress between bloating and stomach aches and sloshing and just nauseousness. I was never the type to actually vomit it all up, but I know many people experience that problem. Porta potty stops I didn't want to be making. You name it, all these different problems. And I tried every different nutrition product out there and was just having problems and problems and problems. So finally in 2014, I said, all right, I've done 4 Ironman events. 2 of them have been severely impacted by nutrition. The other 2 have been impacted by nutrition, but on a more minor scale. and it's costing me minutes or even tens of minutes in my races. So I said, this has got to stop. I got to figure out some better way to do this. And so I reached out to a sports nutritionist in 2014 and said, got to get this nailed down. And she helped me. And one of the first things that we did was she introduced UCAN to me. And I'd never heard of it before. This was 2014. And I'd never heard of it, but I trusted her, decided to go out and buy some, started using it in my training, noticed that I was having this steady energy feeling that the company was talking about. I was consuming less on a calorie or carbohydrate basis than I had to before, and still having stable energy levels. I wasn't having any of the GI distress, like sloshing or anything on my long workouts. And I was also looking forward to my next bottle of UCAN rather than dreading my next bottle of whatever sugary stuff it was or gel. And so those were all good signs, but the true test was going to be in a full Ironman. And so I did Ironman Maryland about 3.5 months after that. And that's where I had this huge breakthrough. So I went from having trouble especially during the run or the late portions of the bike, and it costing me tens of minutes, to me running a 20-minute PR off the bike. I ended up running 3 flat off the bike at Ironman Maryland. I had a 51-minute PR overall. I went 8 hours and 51 minutes, and I won the whole race overall. And that was like my mind-blowing whoa moment. Like there's something to this. I mean, all of a sudden, after 4 Ironmans of having GI distress, I have none at all, and I feel great from a nutrition standpoint the whole time. Everybody should know about this. Why isn't everybody already using it? And so then I only like a few weeks later got hooked up with the company, with the UCAN company and some of the people over there. And they brought me on as a sponsored athlete for them for the next 3 years, which was a fantastic relationship. And then they brought me on as a full-time employee of the company last January. So I'm thrilled to be able to go from Wall Street, which I loved, and it is a passion of mine, to something that is honestly even more of a passion of mine. I get to talk about triathlon and running and endurance sports of all kinds and nutrition about UCAN like all day, and it's my job. So it's just the coolest thing to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's so cool when you can play a piece of that puzzle. I mean, that's what I get to do, for my day job as well. And at those distances, if you can keep your stomach happy, you can dominate, because it's just sort of like a war of attrition as you go on. I did a when I did rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, I got to hour 10 and I was like, I can't eat anymore. and I was 38 miles into 45-ish miles, or 10 hours into 13 hours. And you don't have another option. You just do it, and you must do it. And fortunately, nothing came up, and I switched to a different fuel source and enjoyed some gummy bears and stuff like that. But just to change the palate. But at that distance, if your stomach is happy, you can do some pretty cool things. So talk to me about what it's like for you working in the endurance space, going from being an athlete into working in the space. And I'll sort of bracket that by saying I've wanted to give. So I think that people like the behind the scenes of pro athletes and the pro athlete dynamic that athletes have with companies, and understanding how social media plays in, understanding how sponsorship works, and understanding the nuances of what it actually means to be a pro athlete. And so I've had that conversation probably a dozen times on this podcast. And very early on, I spoke with Devin Yanko, who's been in the sport for, 15 years, and has watched not only the sport grow, but social media grow with it. So we did a pretty good dive into what it's like on the athlete side. But I wanted to have a couple of people like yourself that work for either sports nutrition brands or something like that on the podcast to talk about, the behind the scenes from a brand. So with that very long backstory, what is it like for you?
Yeah, well, I love that we're kindred spirits in the sense that we're both just living our passions. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And as far as what it's like, on the living and just breathing all of that, and the sort of the behind the scenes of the sponsorship side of things. I mean, I guess from tell me if this is what you're looking for or not. But from a UCAN standpoint, we've been really blessed to have some athletes and sponsored athletes on our side who are very, very, purely authentic about what they're doing. Like they love UCAN. They notice that it makes a difference for them in their performances and how they feel. Maybe it's in their body composition. There's so many reasons why people come to the brand, and they're living proof of it. They're not like those athletes that you've heard of before, where maybe they're sponsored by, Gatorade or something, and they have a Gatorade bottle on their bike, but they don't even have Gatorade in the bottle, right? Like that is a nightmare to me. Like I dread if that were to ever happen, but we're so fortunate that it hasn't. And all our athletes are so like, if they weren't even sponsored by us, they'd still be using UCAN because they know that it makes a difference. And it kind of reminds me of this whole, like the whole Nike thing, right? It's the biggest testament to your brand if people are giving away sponsorships or like blacking out their shoes so that they can run in these shoes that they believe make a difference. And in our case, like athletes aren't even sponsored by UCAN, or maybe they were in the past or whatever it may be, and they still use UCAN. So it's just a testament to the difference that it can make. So we've been very, very fortunate to have athletes like Meb Keflezighi on since before we were even a company. Back in 2009, he was using Superstarch before UCAN even existed. And then Tim O'Donnell, he uses it he's a pro triathlete. He was second at the Ironman World Championship last year in Kona, Hawaii. And he's been using UCAN since early last year. And he uses it in more ways than I've ever seen an athlete use it. He uses it in probably say 3 to 5 times a day in various different ways during his training and outside of his training.
Cool. How has 2020 forced UCAN to adapt, and what have been some of the challenges that you've experienced?
Yeah. Well, in March, all people could think about was COVID. And so we, like many companies, took a hit in our revenue. And we've done, I think, relative to most companies in our space, have done very, very well. But we are still down from a revenue standpoint. And that's because we have a number of distributors and on the ground distributors and ways that people could typically buy UCAN that are not functioning anymore. So for instance, we have a bunch of retailers like your Fleet Feets and things that carry UCAN. We have Lifetime gyms, all Lifetime gyms in the country carry UCAN. And also teams. There's a bunch of pro sports teams, the NFL and NHL and things, and as well as collegiate teams, universities that are customers of ours that actually buy our products out of their budgets. And all of those are basically shut down. So that went from what it was about maybe 30% of our business down to nothing almost overnight. And so that's been tough. And then on Amazon, there's been some advertising restrictions. And so sales went down on there initially on our website, which is where about maybe 35% of our business, maybe 40% is done just straight direct to consumer through our website. That took a hit at first, but we've done, I think, a great job of pivoting and becoming, remaining top of mind and remaining relevant and adding value to the community. And by the community, I mean running, fitness, triathlon, whatever might encompass endurance, which is what I'm mainly focused on, as well as sort of lifestyle and daily health and wellness. And so we've pivoted to becoming all virtual like everyone else. But instead of, being at expos and events and race sponsorships, we are now doing none of that because none of that is even available. And instead, we're putting pedal to the metal on everything else. So virtual events, whether that be Zoom educational events with influencers and registered dietitians or pro athletes. Maybe it's on the podcast side of things, like working with For the Long Run or other podcasts where we can get the word out through our social media platforms. There's a whole host of different ways that we can get the word out and really engage with the community. And we've, I think, done a great job of that. And so on our store, we've seen record sales actually for the past 4 months.
That's awesome. Jumping back over to you, how has 2020 impacted your own running and training?
I'm actually training more. Am I the only one?
I am as well.
Okay.
I love it. It's like I put in a 17-hour week a few weeks ago, and
wow.
I'm not a triathlete. And one of my friends who is a triathlete was like, "That's hardy. What are you training for?" And I love it. It's just like, let's build. So talk to me about that. Where is much of your volume coming from?
It's 17 hours. That's legit. So if it's just running, that's a lot of running.
No, it wasn't just running. There was a lot of biking in there.
Okay, good. Like you fall apart 17 hours. It's like, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, that's like I don't know, 150 miles a week.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it's a lot of biking and running. I don't really like the swim that much, honestly. I mean, I like aspects of it, but mostly just don't like it. So
I love getting out of the pool.
yeah, right. I like cooling off, getting in the pool and just
Yeah,
paddling around for
exactly.
a little bit. No, but I've been doing a little bit of swimming, but mainly it's just been biking and running, the stuff that I really enjoy. And I've been really just taking a step back and just enjoying it for what it is, and enjoying getting together for a socially distanced run with someone or a bike ride, and just enjoying nature. And my favorite time is 6:30 or so in the morning when nobody else is on the road on like a Saturday or Sunday morning, and everyone else is sleeping, and you're out there and you just you feel like you own the world. It's yours, and there's no cars on the road, and there's, you just go out in the beautiful roads of New Jersey and central New Jersey area, and like just be there with all the birds chirping and the deer on the side of the road and a bear every once in a while. And it's I love that.
That's
So I've only
awesome.
been doing like
Yeah,
8 hours a week though.
so the riding early on in the spring was incredible because everybody was still like super locked down. I'm talking like back in late April, early May, and I was out on the bike. Like you could be out on 11 a.m. on a Saturday, and there was just nobody on the road. It's like, all right, I got to take advantage of this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been great with
So
less traffic.
for sure, have you done any virtual racing, or is it mostly just head down and training?
Mostly training. And I wouldn't even say it's head down. I think it's like, to me right now, it's like head up. Look at all the awesome stuff around us and just take it all in and enjoy training for what it is, instead of always being focused and making it like a chore. Because that's what it feels like sometimes when I'm prepping for a big race. So it's kind of nice not having that race, looming overhead, and always focusing on such a structured plan. It's kind of just whatever I want to do, I do. And a lot of it's dictated by the training partners around me. I'm not being coached right now. I'm just kind of doing my own thing, and I'm staying fit, and I'm in pretty good shape, but I'm just not in I'm not in race shape, but I'm also not mentally suffering from the fact that I'm just crushing myself to try to get the most out of myself over, a short build period leading into a race. But I have done a couple of virtual efforts. I've been doing some Strava KOM hunting.
Nice.
And that's been fun. So some local KOMs. That's I like to do like a hashtag my Mount Lemon. Mount Lemon is like a huge climb in Arizona, and some of the top pro triathletes have been duking it out on Mount Lemon. Like one of them would go take the KOM, and then the next one will go down there and take it back. And so I can't do a Mount Lemon KOM, but I can do my Mount Lemon in my local area. So I've been having some fun with that. And then I did there's the social distancing run. Is a cool, like they've got a sweet medal. They do a virtual race, and so I did that as a 5K earlier, and I guess it was like in May or April, and tested myself with the 5K distance.
Nice. What was that like?
I mean, time wise, I was happy with it given my fitness at the time. So I ran 17:55. It's a far cry from what I've done before, about 2 minutes slower than my PR, but I wasn't in the type of shape where I expected to be anywhere near my PR. So I was happy with it. The execution was good. It was kind of painful, but fun at the same time to test myself and test it in a 5K. That's a brutal race.
What did you do for the route? Yeah.
I just chose like a 2-mile loop that was almost dead flat with no intersections. So it was all right-hand turns, and I just stayed on the right side on a sidewalk.
Nice. I had the thought this morning. I'm like getting into some pretty good shape now, and I've been eyeing my 5K PRs from 2014, and I had no business running the time that I ran when I ran it, and I haven't been able to break it in a race. I matched it in a training session, like a 20-minute not time trial, but 20-minute tempo. And I've been thinking about it, and I kind of want to do it on a track.
Hell yeah. It's the fastest location there is. Get a buddy too.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do it at some point in the next couple of weeks. But the way I've approached this whole period is again, getting back to Devin, she gave me some advice a couple of years ago around how to make decisions about racing, and I was sort of in between deciding on road or trail. And she's like, "Who cares? Do whatever is fun, and do whatever you enjoy, and then ride that until you can't ride it anymore, and then just do something different." And that's sort of how I've approached this time period. Like, I'm having lots of fun not racing and not doing time trials until the point when it starts becoming stimulating and exciting and something that I want to do. And I think I'm at a point where the weather will actually cooperate with my my desire to do it. Thanks again to Janji for sponsoring the podcast. I've enjoyed seeing Janji grow over the years, and their gear has only gotten better as time has gone on. I have a few pairs of both the AFO split and AFO middle shorts and highly recommend them. Their singlets are super cool too. You can take 15% off all month with the code FTLR15. I hope you love them as much as I do. And now back to our conversation. Let's talk about balance. We talked about balance early on, where you mentioned you pretty much only worked and trained and saw your wife. How has your relationship with balance evolved as 2020 has gone on, but as the years have gone on, and working for a company that's in the endurance space, as well as having a family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at first, when I first started, like I'm that kind of guy where if I go into something, I go all in, and I'm wholeheartedly just going after it, having a blast, getting really, really good at it quickly, and closing the gap between me and the better people at whatever it is that I'm embarking on. And that's what I did when I first started doing triathlon in 2010. I found a good training group, a really good training group out of like Hoboken, Jersey City area, which is where I was living at the time, just over the river from New York City. And I was training with them a lot. And the balance was honestly pretty terrible at first. I was just training and working and sleeping, and that was basically it. And every waking hour I was trying to fill with training, because at the time I thought that there was this linear relationship between training and getting better. And it breaks down after a while. So I saw, okay, when I'm training 4 hours a week, I'm at a certain level. When I'm training 7 hours a week, I'm better. And then I'm training 10 hours a week and I'm getting even better. And now 12 hours a week, even better. And so I just like had it in my head. And I think like many people, that relationship would just hold up. And so I started pushing the boundary, pushing that limit there to see how many hours I could fit into my schedule. And everything just sort of became like that dead zone, high zone 2, low zone 3 kind of training. I wasn't really giving my body the right stimulus to get better at the sport. And I was just draining myself like with this chronic training, overtraining kind of thing, and doing 15 to 17 hours a week. But my schedule should have only allowed for like 14 to 15 hours maximum. And better would be more like 12 to 14 hours. And I was just trying to fit in too much. And I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was doing what I needed to do in order to be a better athlete, but it wasn't the case. And it took me a little while to realize it. It was till 2014. That was the other facet of my breakthrough in 2014, is that I hired a coach who brought me into the realm of polarized training, high quality, low quantity. I was doing something like 12 to 14 hours a week. And it was, the hard days are hard and the easy days were easy. And all of a sudden I got way, way better. So between that and my nutrition breakthrough, that's what resulted in the win at Ironman Maryland.
Yeah, I think the delta between hard and easy is often overlooked. I fell into a similar pattern where if I was running a 7:30 pace, I thought it was too slow. And I was running a 3:30 marathon at the time. So I had no business running 7:30 pace as an easy pace. And I still barely have, as a sub 3 marathoner, I still barely should be running 7:30 pace as an easy run, in perfectly optimal conditions. And now it's, 8:30, even 9 o'clock or 9 minute miles after hard workouts, that's where, when you have the huge difference between easy and hard and you respect both of them, I think that's, as you said, that's where breakthroughs can happen. So you mentioned the overtraining, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's something we had talked about in the past. What were some of those signs that you were overtraining, and how did you finally decide to back off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a big, long conversation we could have with lots of detail. But the quick and dirty of it is that in 2013, I was just jamming in lots of hours. And so the first sign of it then was that my performance plateaued. I was getting diminishing returns from the training I was doing. And then even, what do you call it? I was tipping over the backside, and my performance was actually getting worse because I was training too much. Then in 2015 is when I started experiencing some symptoms of overtraining and possibly underfueling my efforts. So even though I was eating a lot, and I was sort of unknowingly eating less than I needed to in order to fuel what I was doing. And I didn't know that there was a relationship between, sort of your testosterone levels or your health and hormones and overtraining and potentially underfueling. So in 2015, I unknowingly sort of had buried myself into a hole of not feeling great. And the symptoms that I noticed were just chronic fatigue and low libido. And so I wish for years that I had measured my blood markers to know what a baseline was. And I didn't have that baseline. So then when I saw numbers that were not looking correct, I didn't know how far off I was, but I suspect I was pretty far off. So just put it in perspective. I mean, my testosterone levels were down at 150 total testosterone, and normal is 300 to 1,000, with average for my age at the time, I was 29, being like 650-ish. So I was way low, and I felt terrible. So my performance was lacking, and then the main things that I noticed was this fatigue, this crazy fatigue that I couldn't keep writing off to training. Like I'd be getting off the train from my job on Wall Street, and I'd feel so sluggish, and I just kept blaming it on training for a while. Just saying, oh yeah, I woke up at 4:45 in the morning and I got on the train 20 minutes later, because I'm rushing out the door with my training gear, and I'm going to my training facility, and I'm doing an hour and a half on the bike of an intense ride. And then I'm doing 30 minutes of strength training, and then showering up and running off to work, an 11-hour day. Then I get home after an hour and a half commute, and I'm supposed to do a hill workout. And I'm like getting off the train, like just so sluggish, but I'm thinking, oh, it must just be because I'm training hard. But at that point it was like, I can't keep saying that. This is deeper than that. And it was apparent in my blood markers, but I didn't even know what I should be looking for in my blood markers until August, when I finally sort of figured out that I might have been hurting myself with overtraining and underfueling, and my hormone levels were kind of rocked. And so that was when I started making some corrections especially after Kona that year, which was in October. I sort of stopped training as hard, and I started really taking a hard look at what I needed to do to become a healthier athlete and use that health as a foundation for the performances that I was looking to achieve.
Yeah, I think it's a hard spot to be in, because you would think that by training more you get better results, and yeah, it's diminishing returns at a certain point. But wow, the testosterone of 150 is scary. So it's good that you caught that, and lots of sleep, lots of food, lots of time off from training can obviously help restore that. So the next piece there is how long did it take before you felt good again?
Yeah. I mean, after a couple of weeks of not really training, I think after Kona, I just stopped training completely for 2 weeks, and I packed on some weight, some body fat percentage, ate more, and started doing things like sleeping more. And I started doing some things shortly thereafter, like strength training and taking some natural supplements like zinc, and because I had lower zinc levels, and things that might help with hormone health. And it's sort of unclear whether, from the studies, that they're not really able to discern whether certain supplements, natural supplements, or strength training are like really helpful for building testosterone levels or hormone levels. But because it couldn't hurt, I started doing them anyway. And so between a combination of all those different things, under the guidance of Dr. Ruth Johnson out of New York City, who understood these issues, and Dr. Sylvia Hesse, another orthopedic doctor who understood these issues, I was able to get back to health over the course of many months. I mean, it really took 2 weeks for me to start to feel better, but and I saw my hormones were tested 2 weeks after Kona, and they had bounced back to around 300. So there was a solid increase there, and I wasn't really noticing the symptoms as much, but they weren't nearly back to what I believed was normal for me. So it took me until, I think it was the fall of 2016, when I finally got back up to the 600s. I was like 670 or something in my total testosterone levels. And I think it was last year when I was tested again just to check in and see where I was. I was at about the same, somewhere in the mid 600s. So I was obviously like my normal. Everybody's normal is different. So what you see as average of 600 something is not necessarily applicable to you. I mean, your average might, or your normal might be 300 something or 400 something, or it might be 1,000. It definitely depends on your age, but you can look at averages for your age and use that as a benchmark. But again, you kind of have to know what's right for you and what's average for normal for you. And I didn't know what that was because I never had a baseline taken. So I mean, I would have loved to have had an inside tracker panel done way earlier, because that would have, back when before I even did triathlon, because then I would have known what my normals were, and then I would have been able to see the impact of that training on my blood markers. So it was only in that fall after I had been doing some CrossFit. I mean, all you got to do is walk into a CrossFit studio and your testosterone levels grow up, right?
You get about 250 points just when you pay your first month. Yeah.
Yeah, you just walk into the box for 5 minutes. You're good.
Just start grunting and you're good to go. Yeah.
So I was doing that for some fun and, potential benefit there on the testosterone levels. And it seemed to, maybe work. Who knows?
Cool. So one of the things you mentioned was chasing down, the person in front of you and leaving it all out there. I find this this sort of like go for broke, shoot your shot, let's see what happens to be fascinating. And the perspective around like what's going to happen when I take this risk. Is it going to go really well, or is it going to blow up in my face? I find that moment of unknown like thrilling. So talk to me about that. I mean, that's like the core of one of the core reasons why I do it. So I want to hear a little bit more from you about where's your head at in a moment like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely that kind of guy who I'm all in, and I don't like to do things half-assed. So what I found though is that like when I go all in, like I did with triathlon, I go all in and I get really good at something quickly. But one of the things that I've noticed though is that I'll get really good. I'll get like 90% good at something. I'll be on the doorstep of being great, like truly great. And then something happens like mentally, and where I stop short. And it's something that has always bothered me, not always, but has bothered me ever since I noticed that this type of thing happens with me. And I'm not just talking about triathlon or running. I'm talking about other things in my life too, like just career and working on Wall Street, and maybe it's other sports like golf or like in playing cards or like almost everything. I feel like I get really, really good at something very quickly, and I'm like a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And it perplexes me that on many, many occasions in my life, I've stopped short of being the best, whether, and after seeing such a rapid rise towards the top, I tend to rest on my laurels, get complacent at the exact time when I need to most passionately pursue the last step. So I want, for example, in the triathlon space, like I want to go on and get a bowl in Kona. Right? The Ironman World Championship, you get an Umeke, which is a Hawaiian bowl. It's like a wooden bowl. And you get that as a trophy if you're on the podium in Kona. And I want one of those because to me, like that, almost like in my mind, represents that I've taken that last step and that I have become like one of the best in the world at what I'm doing as an amateur. And so even if that pro career is not something that I take the last step to become a pro and become a full-time, like this is my job kind of thing, that would be another way that I could sort of take that last step and prove it to myself. But because I'm not going to do that, then this last step for me is like getting that bowl, getting that Umeke and Kona is like, that's this last step. I want to prove to myself that I don't always stop short. Like, is that something that you find, like this resting on your laurels, like complacency that could happen? Like, do you see that in a lot of athletes?
So what I find to be the consistent theme on this podcast is less of a focus on, as you're mentioning, a tangible outcome. Like I've asked a handful of athletes, professional athletes, fast forward 10 years, what are you proud of? And they can't tell me. And they don't know. And Vanessa Fraser comes to mind. She didn't have an answer. She said, "I want to just keep getting better. I'm hungry to just get better." And I see a lot of amateur athletes, myself included, for a while, chasing a BQ, a Kona qualifier, a 250, a 230. Well, I guess you're not really an amateur if you're running a 230. A 4-hour marathon, or these time goals that are established by, I don't want to say by somebody else, but it's not like I want to beat my best. It's I want to hit this specific goal. And what I find fascinating from all of these athletes that reflect on this is how many of them don't have an answer, or don't have a tangible answer for what do you see as success. And their process or their experience is focused on, how do I show up every day to get 1 inch closer to being the best version of myself. And so I think that with the goal that you shared, like, there are ways that you can use that to get better on a daily basis. But what is it about that physical item? Well, I guess you shared what it is. It's the understanding, or the self-awareness that you can do something, no pun intended, to be your best, and to be the best in the world at what you're doing. But I'm curious, why does it need to come from an external, I don't want to say outcome, but versus something like, I want to show up for myself every single day and just get better. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Well, see, I guess it doesn't have to coincide with this. I think what that Umeke represents is that I've done it right, that I've done, and what keeps popping into mind as you were talking and as I'm thinking here is the process versus the outcome. And the outcome here is the Umeke, and the process is what I need to do in order to get that. So the process needs to very much be focused on. And that's absolutely one of the things that has gotten me most of the success that I've had, at least to this point, is that whenever I find myself focusing on the process and just ignoring the outcome for a while, it becomes something that is, all of a sudden I put my head down, I'm focusing on the process, and then I pick my head up and I'm like, whoa, the outcome is almost here, or it is here.
Right.
So absolutely. Like, I think
funny how that works.
Getting this, yeah. Like, you just all of a sudden realize, like, you're almost there. You did it, even though you weren't even focusing on it. Right. And I think that's exactly what I'm going to need to do in order to get that Umeke, like the success that I've had so far, to get to that other outcome goal that I have here with this Umeke. I'm going to have to put the head back down and focus on that process to get me back to that point.
Yeah, I think I love that. My question is, let's say you're 1 second behind the person or the guy that wins it. What happens there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess there's like a mix of disappointment, but at the same time, feeling like I was successful in basically achieving the same thing. Because what is 1 second at an Ironman distance? It's not a lot. So essentially, it was just who showed up, and some of the uncontrollables, the things that I can't even. I mean, I don't know who's going to show up and who's going to perform, how they're going to perform. So if I'm 1 second off, and I've done all the work to get to where I thought I need to be in order to get the Umeke, then I think I would be thrilled, but at the same time, I would have that still, like, that little tiny pit in my stomach saying, like, oh, but you didn't get the bowl. You didn't get the Umeke. So you got to try again. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fascinating sort of trying to rectify the process versus tangible outcomes. I mean, for me, I had 4 years of attempting to qualify for Boston and break 3 hours in the marathon. And I thought that I needed that to sort of validate myself as a runner. And, like, I'm not a serious runner unless I can, run sub 3 in the marathon, which is obviously not true, but that's where my head was at. But it took the way that you described like putting your head down and working, and then, oh, actually I'm at the goal. That's the experience that I had. It took distancing myself from the outcome. I stood on the start line at the Providence Marathon on a 52-degree morning where it was drizzling and utterly perfect conditions and I didn't give a shit what happened next in the best way possible. I knew that I had done the work, and I knew that whatever happened, I could be proud of the 1,000 miles it took me to get to that point. And I started that race running 6:30s and being like, oh my God, this is conversational pace and I'm freaking flying and I can't stop. And when I crossed the finish line and saw 2 on the clock, I mean, I wouldn't have cared. I probably would have cared. It wasn't as significant. Like it could have been a 2, it could have been a 3, or it could have been a 4. But it was the like showing up every day. I knew I was better. I knew I was getting better. My coach said I was in the 250 to 3 range. And I really shaved that. I mean, I ran 2:59:40, but when I saw that 2 on the clock, it was, I don't know that I want to say it was validating, but it was encouraging and exciting in a way that I couldn't have imagined. It was like, cool, I did that. Now I'm going to do it again faster next time. And I don't want to say it's the same, being on the top step of the podium at Kona versus like breaking 3 hours. But again, it's the what is the carrot that's always 6 inches in front of your face? It's always going to be 6 inches in front of your face. And I think that's the fun part of sports and why we do it, because one day maybe you'll get that and you'll get the bowl, and what do you do the next day besides rest? I mean, what are you going to do like 2 weeks later?
Probably going to think about what I want next.
Yeah. So what do you think that would be?
Oh, geez. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating, but if I had gotten an Umeke, let's say I was like 4th in my age group, maybe I'd want it, because to get top 5 is to get an Umeke. Maybe I would want to be top in my age group, or maybe I'd want to be top amateur overall, or under a certain time, or I don't know. Maybe there's just some other Kona type goal that I would want. Maybe it's something in an entirely different sport. Maybe I'd want to do like ultra running or ultra man, or I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know, but I'm sure there'd be something.
I think that's the exciting part. And that's sort of where I don't want to say all of the athletes I've spoken to, but probably 75% of them have that continually moving goalpost, and it's always 6 inches in front of their nose, and they're always working towards it. And it's just fascinating that, you have an athlete who's paid to win, and they couldn't tell you what their tangible goal is over the next 10 years. Right? Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it is. I hadn't even really thought about that until you mentioned it.
For sure. Well, it's cool how, I mean, that's why I do this podcast, to like get have these types of conversations with people who are doing excellent things, and understand like, where does the motivation come from, and then what can we all learn from it? Mm-hmm. I'm really glad you asked that or brought it up.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely ties in really well with, and that's what got me thinking about it, is like it felt perfect for this podcast, because right at the beginning of every one of your podcasts, you have that intro that says, we like to explore the why. It's all about the why, and what's the motivation behind things, and why are people doing what they're doing. And it's and I could totally relate also to what you were mentioning with like the beginning of the, I think you said the Boston Marathon was drizzling, and you said how you were just kind of at peace.
Yeah, peace is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and I've noticed that before a lot of my best races ever, I've been in that state of peace, where it's not like, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, but it's not as heightened. And I'm also just like at peace with the idea that whatever I do that day, I'm going to do all that I can do within my control. And I know that I'm willing to dig deep for it, and it'll come when it comes. And if something happens that's uncontrollable, that's what's going to happen. And I'm at peace with that.
And it's really, really hard to get there, but that's where that's where the magic happens. And those are the days that are usually good days.
Yeah. I feel like that's one of the components of flow. I like people talking about
Definitely.
being in the zone.
Yeah. Just like pure peace and bliss. One of the things that I found interesting, and we talked about it early on, is using sport to honor your brother. My grandfather passed away in last fall, and he came to my first marathon, and he loved hearing about all these adventures that I go on. And so I feel like anytime I do something epic, he's watching. I had this feeling when I was in the Grand Canyon that like he was there with me. Is that something that you felt with your brother? How do you continue to honor that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, what you say, absolutely true. You always have that sense that he's there just watching, or, there somehow. And definitely in my mind, I mean, in my heart, he's there, and always will be. So every year on his birthday, and every year on the day that he passed, anniversary of the day that he passed, like those days we remember, and, we'll just give a call to each other, like my dad and my wife, and we'll call each other and just connect that day just to make sure that we remember him. But during those, during the, during my win at Ironman Maryland, he was in my mind throughout a lot of that run and the bike, and just remembering like all the kind of suffering that he went through, the things that he did that were inspirational to me, and hoping to kind of, do his memory justice by sort of laying it all out there, make him proud in a way.
Is gratitude something that you intentionally practice?
Yeah. I mean, gratitude for a lot of the time, it's just like gratitude to be able to do what we do.
Yeah.
Having this body that can run so many miles and bike so many miles, and this mind that can be so strong to put ourselves and, hit the override button and force ourselves to do things that you don't think you're capable of doing, or maybe other people don't think you're capable of doing, is an amazing thing. So absolutely, gratitude, if it's explicit in something that I'm thinking about, like that word gratitude, sometimes something that is subconscious, that is constantly running through the back of my mind, absolutely, it's there, like, pretty much all the time.
Awesome. What is, besides the importance of rest, recovery, and nutrition, what's one thing you wish you knew when you started triathlon that you know today?
I mean, for fear of beating the dead horse of balance, I mean, balance is definitely one of those things. But the other thing I think would be just even more so learning from those around me, and leaning on the experts, and leaning on all the different sources of information that we have these days, so that I could learn as fast as possible. So I know at the time I was really leaning mainly on my training partners, but as you saw with the nutrition example, your training partners don't always have the answer. So it's a great source, and that's something you should certainly listen to, is talk to your buddies. But it's a lot of it too is like listen to podcasts, like for the long run. I mean, you might learn some really interesting things from some of the expert guests that you have on here. Read different articles and blogs and things that come out. Read the studies and the research, in the literature that we have, which is becoming ever more robust these days. And talk with coaches and talk with nutritionists, and really just like soak up all that information, because there's so much to learn. And I feel like right now I'm so much better prepared to be a strong athlete than I was 8-10 years ago, or especially like when I was in high school. I mean, looking back on that, it's like I knew absolutely nothing, but I thought I knew more than I really knew.
Awesome. Well, if we want to follow along with your journey as you strive for greater sense of balance and lots of training hours, where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Bach, and on Facebook also at Bach. And then I have a website. You can go there. That's ironmanbach.com. And then on the UCAN side of things, if you're interested in trying it or just learning more about it, it's ucan.co. Ucan.co is the website. And for the long run listeners, have a discount code you can use too, FTLR, for 15% off anything on the site. And we're also, UCAN is on Instagram and Facebook, so you can learn more and follow along on those the awesome content that we put out too.
Awesome. And you have two dogs that have great names to match your last name. So what are your dogs' names?
Yeah, we have two long hair miniature dachshunds, and their names are Johann and Sebastian Bach.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thanks so much for taking the time to chat, and we'll see you out there.
Thank you, Jonathan.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.